Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm sure it's been a long day, and again, I should have bought the bar cart to come in for you guys coming in. So I do appreciate you guys hanging in there. This has been a fantastic conference so far, and the sharing of information, I got to tell you, is very refreshing. It really is. Everybody's want to talk and help out and stuff. So this is a bit more starting point for a lot of people and where they're going to go. A little background on myself. I was in this industry for over 30 years and still am, and very passionate about it. So working around BIM, FIM, architecture, different systems. And I'm a father of three, retired basketball and football coach to many. It's because my kids are off in college and high school and so forth. Unlike TJ and Chuck, I'm a hibernating architect who still designs, renovates, and builds whenever I get the chance. So again, when I grow up, that's what I want to become again, even that's what I was educated in. So again, an advisor, I have a BS in architecture from Clemson University and work with that. So today is about the end in mind. And I think that we've worked around a lot of architects, engineers, facility managers for about 20 years. And one of the things that's most consistent is they're not really sure usually where they want to end up. And that's usually what I always try to direct them, is that when you're done with this, at the end of it, what do you want to have as an outcome to this? So one of the things that I've often presented and talked to people is, as built or as designed, what's in your inbox? Which one do you have? Because most people think they have as built or as designed, and they really have a hybrid or neither. So again, it's an educational part. So I wanted to give a quick little joke that I'd heard recently that was really tied into this pretty well. And there's a plane that's about to crash. There's 4 passengers. There's 3 parachutes on the plane. So the first guy says, I'm a world-renowned surgeon. He said, my patients need me. He grabs the parachute, jumps out. Second guy says, I'm a famous and the smartest man in the world. I'm a rocket scientist. He goes, my country needs me. Grabs the parachute, jumps out. Third person is Pope John Paul. And he tells this young boy who's a Boy Scout, he said, listen, he said, I'm old and frail. You go ahead and take the parachute. And he said, that's okay, sir. The smartest man in the world just grabbed my backpack. So where that's applicable is knowing really what you have. Do you have a backpack? Do you have a parachute? What are you trying to get? So again, part of this is the objectives today, what we're going to try to cover and walk through. BIM deliverables, I'm going to kind of demystify BIM a little bit. I'm not going to educate you on that. There's many in this room who have been talking at a very high level for a number of days on this and working on how to help customers out. One of the things I've had many side conversations with that is really, I guess it's kind of amazing, but there's a lot of folks who are kind of so overwhelmed, they're afraid to even start anything. And I think that that's our objective, and everyone in here has been so helpful at helping everyone else out in this. So part of this is that hopefully we'll have a process to work through this. So I'm going to give you a quick overview, and many of you already know this, but I want to at least establish that, parameters for that. What do you need? How are we going to ask for it? And then what do you do when you receive it? And can you keep it up to date in the end for that? So part of this is the background of this. And working through this process, many of you are very familiar with the design aspect from schematic to DD to CD, and then it goes over to the building, and they work on the pre-construction. They usually redo all the drawings anyway because they're working and focused on constructing, not designing. And then that gets thrown over to the operators or FIM or owners who have to figure out, how do I work with these 300 PDFs, 40 half-size blueprints, and use this stuff, or electronic CDs or information. So it really becomes a bit of a challenge for them to figure out what tools they can have and use to get the information going forward. So one of the things that's been very encouraging in the last 10 years, and this didn't happen back then, it's starting to happen now, is that facility managers are starting to get out in front and getting involved at the very beginning of a construction process sometimes. Or if they don't, they're starting to define what it is that they want to get as an outcome to this. So it's been very positive in that sense. BIM, it's so funny because the acronyms for this, Building Information Modeling, Building Information Management, Building Intentional Mayhem, is what I had one customer mention to us, bringing incidental mess to a situation where they have so much information that they don't know how to get that in. One of the things I would say is, why is it not called something else? Campus information spreadsheets? Who has more spreadsheets on data than Revit drawings? Everybody? Who has drawings? In this room, how many of you have more DWG files than you have Revit files? Right? Probably most everybody, right? Because there was a hybrid environment. So I think that that's one of the things. I think it's an all or none situation. And that's what I think is somewhat unfortunate. I think that's where we have to kind of help educate the marketplace, especially for those just starting out, just to understand what they want to get as an outcome to this. So why BIM? Again, this is a simplified version to this, but understanding analysis, I think Joe, you did a good job at saying sometimes you've got to use a model to show proof of concept, to show what it's going to look like, to help people get buy-in for the situation. There's a lot of value in that. Again, number 4 and 5 in this are the ones that most owners end up with. They don't need as much of the graphics, the actual LOD portions of this, and they want more developed, more data, not so much the detail that you need for construction. And then connected data sources, which I think is something that we're all aspiring to work toward in that sense. So, part of the components of this right now are there's a lot of information, and keeping it up to date is always a challenge, as everybody in here can attest to, but it's an ongoing process and working with this. One of the advantages of working within a model environment is it starts to aggregate and put things in a place that they can share common data. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Many times there's a golden rule, and this has gone on for a long time, but I'd like to say that there's a different golden rule that's going out. And you would think it'd be rhodium, who actually is worth twice as much as gold, which I was surprised to see in that sense. So a lot of stuff that everybody has rhodium in some manner or form in jewelry and such, so that should be worth twice as much as the golden rule. But I would actually say that what's now the new golden rule with us is the information. It's not the B, the building. It's not the M, the model. Those are byproducts. That's not a process. And I think people get caught up, I need the model. It's like, that's just part of this. It's the whole part to working with this. So again, in the information and working through this, it's again about the information. In the past, when you're working with this, many customers have many aggregated files and spreadsheets and drawings and various things, and you might think that it's a plug-and-play environment, but we would probably likely tell you it's more plug and pray. You plug it in, you pray, and you hope it's up to date. So that's a big part of what we're trying to do is work through this and educate folks as well. A confusing topic is model types. There are so many different model types that we've identified in working with customers, and I think it gets confusing to this. And again, if they know what they're looking to get, it helps them drive that back into that sense. And we can talk more about the different types that we've identified in working with customers as well that are available and how that might help a customer or confuse them in that sense. This is something that TJ and his team have built for many of our customers we've worked through, helping them understand and how the information gets to them and how they can use that in their particular situation, because understanding goes in that the architect designs structures to live or work in, and that's their intent, is design intent. When it goes to construction, their goal is to build the representation accurately, reliably, in the right budget, in the right time frame. On the back end, the owner side of the stuff, we have different needs as well. The digesting of information and understanding how this goes as well makes a big difference. So again, some of the federated model is part of an as-built, which is really just used as a background and for litigation stuff. It wouldn't necessarily be used unless it's an extensive renovation. So again, everybody has different situations, but understanding those type of things are a big part of this. And again, another example is the AE firms as they design the information, goes in the contractors, and then goes into hopefully an aggregated model, and it would be a CA model or a completed operation model if that's the end goal. If that's what people get. All too often, that isn't what happens, and I think it's important that it's written into the contract so that they have the opportunity to do so. This is a typical day in my office. As we walk down the hall and somebody says, hey, I have a customer and you have a problem. So part of this is the designer gets this and it goes over to the construction, and then they take out the steel and it goes in and it goes down to something else. So the MEP goes to FabCAD, and then they take the sprinkler system and throw it to SprinkleCAD, and they pull it into here, and then it comes into this. And they have like 16 different packages, and they wonder why you can't get a combined model, is because it's in all these different systems. Now, I would say that through IFC, through COBE, through all the different translators, it's getting much better to have a cohesive model, but it's pretty complicated, and most owners don't understand the process that goes involved in building something for that. So a lot of opportunity in that. Facilities management really is 3 things when I boil it down. It's people, places, and things, and usually constitutes one of those things for that. Things are pretty much anything you can stick a barcode on and track people with that. So, don't forget, IoT for buildings, the information that is coming in for that. There's such an opportunity in there, but there's also each of these is something that's done at different levels in different terms, and depending on your needs, you may have a project that you could test this out on. And one of the things that I think that we try to stress is to work in a pilot program. If you have a whole campus, you're not going to go to Revit overnight, not going to go to BIM, you're not going to go to Connected. You have to take a small pilot project, a small section, a floor, a renovation, and then do that over time. And that's really the best way to try to work through that as opposed to trying to do it all at one fell swoop for that. You know, again, you've got to have a plan. You've got to start somewhere. So a lot of what we end up with is trying to help customers understand where they're going and knowing what they're trying to do and avoiding the pitfalls along the way. Making sure that they're not even trying because they're afraid of even giving a shot with this. So part of the current challenges that we've encountered with this is working with and getting accurate and usable data. You know, some great examples we've seen in the last 2 days on ways that you can pull that in and try to classify that. You know, everybody hopefully has heard GIGO, you know, garbage in, garbage out. You know, if you get it, data isn't good, it's a pretty report that's inaccurate, and that really gets us in trouble anyway. So knowing where the data came, how you'll get it back, and how you keep it up to date. So I think this is what a lot of our customers are thinking is, oh my gosh, is this a hazardous situation? Am I going to get into? Am I going to get in trouble? Am I going to lose my job? You know, I think that this sums it up. You know, you just got to go for it. Well, he doesn't seem worried. No, not at all. Yeah, that's the hazmat materials that he's sitting in there. But again, I think it's getting them to know that take one step at a time, trying to work in process for this. Many years ago, when we were working with our vendors and stuff and working with Autodesk, I used to have to fly out to Autodesk because Al Gore had not invented the internet yet. So we had to go out to take training. And I was training with a guy who was doing programming. This is, again, probably 5 years after Autodesk started its business. And this is a binary file of a drawing. And I was amazed. And he goes, oh, yeah, here's a polyline right through there. There's a hatch pattern. And I'm like, what are you talking about? The only reason it's shown in graphics is because we have to read it and interpret that way. So again, a lot of what has gone on today with the different tools that people are using is that it's about the information. The graphics really are just a picture for us to understand how something's designed or built in that situation. So again, computers don't need to have the graphics. They look at the other information, and that's, again, partly what we're looking to try to figure out. If you can automate something, you have to be able to predict it. So you have to have a predicted analysis of breaking this down. So one of the things we've tried to do is working with some customers that are just starting out with this and trying to automate their facilities. You know, we'll try to break it into some different scenarios. Here's one example we use with most that are just starting out. You know, planning, we have to have different planning needs. We have maintenance needs, renovations, and then emergencies sometimes. We work a lot with the federal government. There could be different situations. It might be a move, and that may fall up under something like renovations for that. But it helps them start to classify what they're looking at developing and building to get the end result that they're looking for. So in that sense, and there's been some really good examples on the previous sessions with Ohio State and Western Michigan has some good ones. Bruce, yours was really good at breaking down what people are looking to get. So part of this is as you go through BIM requirements or a project execution plan, you know, it's overwhelming what could be in that model. But in the end, what are you going to use the data for? If you're not going to use it, don't ask for 400 things. Because in many cases, that's just going to bloat your model, make it really difficult to use and to tie into things. And also, not everything has to be in the model. It could be external to that. That's the great thing about having external data sources. Keep the data outside of it if you can, because then other folks, resources, departments can update that information for that. HR is a real good example of that. I get in conversations almost every time with facility managers that are just starting out, and they say, oh, do you want the HR information? I said, absolutely. I'm like, all right, do you maintain that? And I said, no, I'll get that. All right, so what are they going to give to you? And, you know, they're not going to give you Social Security. They're not going to give you their wages. They're not going to give you some other stuff. But they need something that you have. You have space numbers because you should be the primary holder of that space number. So likewise, you can work through that. Same thing with IT, with security, other areas. So part of that is bridging the gap and working with different groups and finding the common denominator and knowing where the source of truth and who's going to maintain that information is important for that. So in this situation, again, this is a much lighter one than the one I'm going to show you on this next one, where you really start to break down, which is in a project execution plan. But if you look back at something a little bit lighter, it helps them start to understand the different sections of what they're looking for. And it's important because I don't think in many cases that they understand that, because ultimately these things are going to go into a report or a drawing or another data source. So there's 3 places where it could potentially end up. If you look at the different plan types, and this is a small subset of the plan types that we've encountered over the years. I mean, this list could have taken this entire page of all the different plan types that owners need. I mean, you think about what we heard today. There was the flagpole. There's different plan types for so many different things. One of the things on a plan type that we had with a law firm, they were moving, and their biggest issue was parking garage, parking spaces. He was going crazy because in DC, it was expensive space. He needed to know where his people were. So I said, not a problem. Give us the plan. We put it in. We assigned the space and the parking space. He could run a report. You would have thought we just solved world hunger for that poor guy. You know, but again, they weren't thinking in that manner that if you had this other information, you were able to keep track of that. Same thing with people, places, and things, and how that breaks down. So different plan types, oftentimes folks have this information and they don't know how to pull it back out. Has anybody ever had CADD standards in a group? Have you ever gotten CADD standards back and actually looked at it and all your layers are there, but all your content was on layer 0? You know, there's no way to check that data, right? And that's part of the challenge. That's one of the things I think that, you know, as far as understanding that information and having a quality control or check point in place is really critical for that. So working through that, you've got so many different types we've seen. These are, again, a small part of this place. I worked with a firm about 10 years ago, and they had a big emergency preparedness situation. So between fire wardens, shelter in place, fire egress, there was a whole litany of information that we had to collect, which was an exposure for me. We were able to learn, but again, it was an asset for fire equipment, for different medical equipment, for making sure that the preventive maintenance was done on the fire extinguishers and things of that nature. So again, if you can help them understand what they need, because they should be able to articulate that, it allows you to go backwards to find out how you're going to get the data and then how you're going to keep it up to date. In the reports, as you guys know, there's 1,000 of them, and this is the typical one. You know, I'll get, hey, Matt, if you had 2 reports, oh, my gosh, you would solve all my problems. So I give them those 2 reports, and they're like, yeah, that was good back then. And then the scroll comes out because they've been educated on all the things they can get from that. And then what's amazing is as people start to understand this, when they get over the hump and the curve of learning this, you may track spaces initially. You may track furniture. Same law firm came to us, and each of the partners that become a partner, they get a $20,000 furniture allowance. Okay, so we had to build an asset depreciation table so we could track that for write-offs, capital expenses, inventory, and insurance. So it was amazing how many things we were able to do. And when they said, hey, where's that famous $15,000 piece of art, we could actually pull it up. We went and showed right where it was out of the 90 partners. So again, and you guys have had similar situations as well for that. If you need a conference room of a certain size, when the information's in there, it's very, very powerful to know what you can look for quickly for that. So really, the questions that we've boiled down to help facility managers when they're first getting started out so that they're not trying to boil the ocean is, you know, what do you need to track of this stuff? And more specifically, what do you currently have? Second thing is, how did it get there? And can you repeat it? You know, it doesn't do any good if you have great information if there's no way to maintain it or keep it up to date. So it's very important for them to understand their workflow and can they maintain that process? Because if they're not going to be able to maintain it, then it needs to be, a clear expectation needs to be made so that they know that the information is going to become stale very quickly. So another part is current systems. What do they have in place to manage their systems? Is it Excel? Is it AutoCAD? Is it Revit? Is there, you know, what tools do they have available that they could help to do this? Users, very, very critical part that's often overlooked. Who's going to use the system and in what capacity? And again, the most famous ones are budget and time and money, right? How much time is it going to take? What's it going to cost? And that really is a determining factor toward the end of it. And that's why we usually try to put that back off as they go through this educational part to this. So in this sense, there's 3 primary groups. There's data creators, those that either create the information, pull it in, manipulate it. Data managers is one that have to make sure that we implement it and maintain accurate, consistent information. Everyone else is usually those who are read-only. you know, the consumers of the information, whether they're students or customers or whatnot, and how they're going to actually look at that information to keep that up to date and use that. So one of the things that I jokingly tell our service team all the time is like, know what floor your audience is on, you know, because often they're talking up here and then the person's going, you're speaking, you know, gibberish to me. Understand where they are, and I think that's the same thing as well as when we're asking for data that we're trying to help them understand what we need specifically. It's very important to be able to go back through that. So how are you going to ask for this information? Well, there's a couple of different things to look at, and I won't dive as much into this. TJ gave a very deep dive yesterday on this, on the different sections of a BIM requirement. This is kind of a quick snapshot of an overview of those sections that may be in here. And again, this is a journey. It's not a destination. So in other words, even if you can't get everything, get started on something. There are so many resources out there that you can start from and gather to give you a good starting point. I loved what Ohio State did 10 years ago. They said, yeah, we just asked for a BIM model. It's a good starting point. We have customers all the time who end up with drawing files, and we'll go to them and say, why are you doing that? And they're like, you know, well, nobody's giving us BIM. It's like, well, you're not requiring it. You have that ability to require it in your contracts. Ask for it. Customers just flattening it back out to DWG, you're losing all that information that you could have at your disposal. So they don't understand that a lot of times to get it written into the contract. Yeah?
I was going to say, just this week, in fact, we're working on a project right now where the owner didn't have a big budget. They only had a couple $1,000s. And we said, what can we do to get started? And we're working on that middle section for them. Just modeling requirements, that's it. That way when they say, give me a model, at least they have some guidelines to say, all right, what should that model even look like? What should be in it? And they're not following the whole process, but at least they're getting some models that are consistent. They're doing that for a few grand. And that's easy to do. It's a good first step to do.
Yeah. Thanks, TJ. So a lot more information on that that TJ's gone through. And again, this is the execution plan, which is a project-based plan in itself for that. So these two play on each other. I'm not going to dive that much into that. So how do we help our customers, at least the ones that are getting started with this thing? A big part of this is having a strategy, is getting somebody to help oversee this. Where do I get started on this thing to start this process to work through this? You know, and again, a BIM strategy is usually what we classified, helping a customer go through that process. BIM requirements in a PXP of some sort, a project execution plan, standards that might be in place. You know, what is your standard Revit model or drawing templates or Navis or Excel spreadsheets? You know, standardizing your data to give to people to supply back to you is a good first step for that. And again, BIM management, somebody needs to manage this data. This is not easy stuff. So you have to make sure that you have the right people in place to do so in that sense. And really, this is really the three different buckets that we would classify things, that there's three different levels to this. Now, the variances in the short term, it could be anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. The medium term could be 1 to 3. I think the one I saw before with you guys, and you're leading the class with Ohio State, that's 10, and you're still learning through this process, right? Always adjusting, but it isn't stopping you from getting forward and moving on this. So again, BIM requirements, project execution, define a BIM manager, look at templates, pilot projects, and education. Make sure there's an educational program to keep people up to date. The software, the people, the needs, everything is changing so fast that we have to make sure we don't ignore the educational platform for that. Medium term, the BIM documents, again, continued refinement, updates to this as you get feedback. Revit additions as well, and working through this, O&M systems, and hopefully being able to feed it into a system people can use for that. Long term, you can start to set up different default setups. Then it gets fun with data connections, and then you've got future technology that we haven't even begun to touch the sense and work through on IoT and everything that's going through with that. So again, the handheld devices, those wonderful smartphones we have are a collector, and you're going to see a lot of changes coming out very quickly with that. So one thing is mentioned several times with this, there are free tools as well to help with this. Now, when we started on this thing 8 years ago or so, we had installation files. Then we started getting samples. So we're on a journey here as well. The videos, which have been a tremendous help for our help desk, were something that didn't come until year 3 or 4 or 5, and we're continually refining that. So again, this is about a journey for that and not overwhelming people for this, working on this. So got to have a game plan in place of some sort for this. Got to get people to buy into this program and have something that they can add value to this. Change. People are always worried about trying to change with that. So part of this is making sure that leadership has the right expectation to setting the right path for this so that they know where they're headed in that path. Education we've talked about and awareness for that. And don't ignore outsourcing options. If you need someone to fill a gap or get you started with that, reach out, find someone. There's a lot of resources out there. There's free resources as well for that. So, and then part of managing change is the smartphone change how we all act and live? Yeah, pretty dramatically so, right? Airbnb, Uber, Open Shed, digital subscription. Open Shed's where you can rent tools, by the way, just like a car and everything else. So it's really amazing how much this has changed. Read a statistic, my daughter just got out of college. She's going to have between 15 and 20 jobs in her career. That's the new change. I mean, can you imagine that? That's kind of crazy, kind of scary. I don't know when I'm going to get the return on investment for the college I just paid for, but we'll get to that. You know, can you imagine a world without Amazon? Really? I mean, that quickly. And if you haven't seen a drone today, don't worry. It's been watching you. You know, they're everywhere. I mean, the amount of information we're collecting and gathering, so it's about change. You have to be able to accept it. It's my favorite quotes of all time. For me, Henry Ford said if you had asked people what they wanted, they'd have just said faster horses. So again, we have to try to think ahead and try to find ways to help move the industry, move and progress with that. So working with the team, looking to make sure the culture is a good fit and that your team is critical. It's often overlooked for that. Starting with small and work your way back up, making sure there's a vision and a timeline so people have the right expectations that you're not going to solve world hunger in 3 months. You know, it's very important to that. Education and revisit the plan. Make sure that there's a continual communication plan that goes back out so that that expectation can be set as well for that. I only had 30 minutes, so I had to go pretty quickly with this. And I know I'm coming toward the end of my time, but you know, we covered several different things with this. I think the biggest thing is deciphering the islands, and then with implementing facility information management, you know, a path for the proper team members, making sure there's components in place, and then a defined and shared facility information model roadmap is really critical for this. So, and don't forget, what you have today isn't what you're going to want tomorrow. So, okay, any questions? Are we ready for happy hour? Okay, great. Well, thank you for your time today. I'll be up here afterwards. Have a great rest of the conference. Thank you.